Behind closed doors, we were everything we pretended not to be outside. The world never knew your voice the way I did, soft, unguarded, almost afraid of its own honesty. When the door shut and the noise of life faded, you became someone else. Someone real. Someone who didn't flinch when my name rested on your lips like a secret you were finally allowed to keep. In that small room, time behaved differently. Minutes stretched, hours dissolved. The walls listened, the ceiling watched, and even the air seemed to hold its breath for us. You would sit beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched, close enough that I could feel the truth in your silence. Your hand always found mine eventually, hesitant at first, then certain like it had been searching for mine all day. You smiled differently there. Not the smile you gave the world practiced, polite, empty, but the kind that cracked open your face and let your soul spill out. You laughed without checking who might hear. You leaned into me without fear. You spoke about dreams you never mentioned anywhere else, about wounds you pretended didn't exist. And I listened, thinking this must be what love is, being trusted in the dark. You told me I felt like home. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet confession slipped between heartbeats, as if saying it any louder might break the spell. I held onto those words like they were sacred, like they were proof that what we had was real even if it lived only in shadows. At night, when the world finally stopped demanding things from you, you became gentle. You traced invisible lines on my palm, slow and thoughtful, as if memorizing me. You asked questions no one else bothered to ask. You noticed the smallest changes in my mood, the slight pauses in my breathing. You saw me. Or at least, I thought you did. We talked about everything we never talked about anywhere else. Fear. Loneliness. The exhaustion of pretending to be okay. You admitted how tired you were of being strong, of fitting into a version of yourself everyone expected. I told you about the ache of wanting to be chosen without having to beg. Our confessions tangled together until it felt like we were healing each other just by being honest. In that space, I felt safe. Safe enough to believe your promises when you said, "It's just complicated right now." Safe enough to accept one day, things will be different. Safe enough to wait. I convinced myself that love didn't need an audience. That it didn't need to be announced or defended. That what mattered was what happened when no one else was around. I told myself that real things were often quiet, often hidden, often misunderstood by the world. You kissed me like you were afraid of losing me. Like the moment mattered. Like I mattered. And I let that convince me that the rest, your distance outside, your hesitation, your silence, was temporary. I believed the private version of you was the truest one, and the public version was just armor. Sometimes, when the room was especially quiet, I'd catch you staring at me. There was something in your eyes then, conflict, maybe. Or guilt. I never asked. I didn't want to hear an answer that might shatter what we were building in the dark. Instead, I held onto the warmth of your presence. The way your voice softened when you said my name. The way you stayed a few seconds longer before leaving, as if you were memorizing the feeling too. Those moments felt like proof that I wasn't imagining us. Behind closed doors, you chose me. And I let myself believe that was enough. I didn't realize then that love shouldn't have to hide to survive. That being cherished only in private slowly teaches your heart to accept invisibility. I didn't know that every time you closed that door behind you and stepped back into the world without me, a small part of me stayed behind waiting. But in that beginning, none of that mattered yet. All I knew was this. In the quiet, you were mine. And I was willing to build my entire world inside that silence. Outside, you became a stranger I was expected to recognize. The moment the door opened, something invisible slid between us. It was as if the air itself reminded you of who you were supposed to be. Your shoulders straightened, your voice changed, and the warmth you carried inside stayed behind with the closed door. I followed you into the noise, still holding the echo of your touch, unaware that it would not follow me. Your hand let go of mine before anyone could see it there. It wasn't sudden. It was careful. Calculated. As if you were gently placing something fragile back where it didn't belong. You took half a step ahead of me, then another. Not far enough to lose me completely, just far enough to pretend we weren't connected. I noticed it immediately. The space. The way you walked slightly faster. The way your eyes stopped searching for mine. You spoke to others easily, freely, while I hovered on the edges of your presence like an afterthought. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was being sensitive. That love sometimes looks different in public. But my chest knew the truth before my mind did. When people spoke to you, you answered without glancing back at me. When someone laughed, you laughed louder. You belonged out there, fully, comfortably. I stood beside you and felt like a secret I wasn't allowed to acknowledge. Someone asked if we came together. You paused. Just long enough for hope to rise in me. Just long enough to break it. You smiled and said something vague, something safe, something that placed me nowhere specific. A friend. Someone you knew. Someone passing through your life without leaving fingerprints. I smiled too, because I didn't know what else to do with the hurt swelling in my throat. You didn't look at me when you said it. I wondered how someone could hold my face in their hands hours earlier and now avoid my eyes so effortlessly. How someone who knew every crack in my heart could treat me like a stranger without flinching. It felt like watching you erase us in real time, and I wasn't allowed to stop you. We stood in the same room, but not together. Your laughter floated freely, while mine stayed trapped inside my chest. You spoke with confidence, with ease, with a version of yourself that didn't include me. Every time someone stepped between us, you let them. Every time the distance grew, you didn't close it. I tried to shrink. I tried to be quieter, smaller, less noticeable, thinking maybe that would make this easier for you. Maybe if I asked for less, I would hurt less. Maybe love required patience, understanding, sacrifice. Maybe this was the price of being chosen in private. But the world kept reminding me that I wasn't chosen here. At one point, our eyes met across the room. For a split second, I saw it, the recognition, the memory of what we were when no one was watching. My heart jumped, stupid and hopeful. But then you looked away, and the moment dissolved like it had never existed. That hurt more than the distance. Because it told me you knew what you were doing. When we finally left, walking side by side in silence, the noise of the world still clinging to us, I waited. For an explanation. For a joke. For your hand to find mine again. Anything that would tell me I hadn't imagined the loss. But you said nothing. The door closed behind us once more, and you reached for me like nothing had happened. Your touch was familiar, comforting, dangerous. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to ask why I disappeared the moment others appeared. I wanted to know what part of me was so difficult to claim. Instead, I let you hold me. Because part of me was afraid that if I spoke, the private version of you would vanish too. And losing you completely felt worse than losing you in pieces. But something had shifted. The silence inside me was louder now. The space between us followed me even into the quiet. And for the first time, I wondered how long a heart could survive being loved only in hiding. I learned how to love you in whispers. Outside, the world didn't know me as yours. They never would. And the truth is, I didn't even know how to be yours fully when the world was watching. Every time someone passed by, every time your eyes glanced at someone else, a quiet panic settled in my chest. My love had to shrink, condense, disappear almost entirely, leaving only the smallest trace for anyone to see. So I began to speak to you in silence. In the small things. In the half smiles, in the lingering glances, in the brush of fingers as we passed each other in crowded rooms. I memorized your habits, your quirks, the way you laughed when no one else could hear it. I learned your pauses, your hesitations, your secret sighs. And I loved all of it fiercely, even when no one else was allowed to witness it. I sent you messages that could be read as casual. I held back words that would make everything too obvious. I hid my heart in plain sight, daring you to see it without ever giving away the entire map. I laughed at your jokes even when they weren't funny, just to hear your laughter, the private version, not the one you gave the world. I became an expert in half-truths, in quiet endurance, in loving in ways that left no evidence. I defended you to friends who didn't know your heart, who never knew the battles you fought in silence. I shielded your reputation, hid your mistakes, and kept the parts of you that no one else could handle. I carried your weight along with my own. I believed that love required this sacrificing recognition for intimacy, visibility for authenticity. At night, when the world finally went quiet, I replayed everything we had shared behind closed doors. I clung to the warmth of your hands, the sound of your voice, the weight of your gaze on me. I held those memories close, like fire against winter, and whispered your name to the empty room. I loved you in ways that were invisible to everyone, including you at times. But silence is heavy. The weight of unacknowledged love presses down on you slowly. It seeps into your bones and makes your chest ache without relief. I began to notice how my laughter sounded hollow when you were near others. How my own words stumbled when I tried to include you in stories outside our room. How I flinched when you spoke too freely, as if loving you openly might break some invisible rule you had set. I started to measure my love in absence. In what I could give without demanding. In the space I could create between us so the world would not notice. It was a strange, exhausting kind of devotion, loving someone without the right to love them fully. And yet, I continued. I clung to the hope that the private version of us was enough. That it could survive the public version. There were nights when the ache became too much. When I wanted to scream your name into the darkness, to shake the walls until they acknowledged what I felt. When I longed for someone to see the way my heart swelled with you, to recognize the way you had become the center of my universe. I couldn't. The private walls of our love were both sanctuary and prison. And you, sometimes, offered a glimpse of understanding. A lingering touch, a look that lasted just a heartbeat too long, a word meant only for me. Those moments were fragile, fleeting, and yet they tethered me to you. I held onto them like they were the only proof that what I was feeling was real. That the love I carried silently was not a lie. I began to wonder if you even noticed. Did you feel the weight of my love pressed into the empty spaces beside you? Did you ever sense how much I was willing to endure just to keep a piece of us alive? Or was I simply invisible, a shadow of devotion that existed only to comfort me? Yet still, I loved you. In whispers. In stolen moments. In every quiet breath I drew when no one was looking. I loved you in a way that demanded nothing, expected nothing, and yet left my heart exposed in ways I hadn't thought possible. Loving you in silence became my habit, my identity, my unspoken truth. And I carried it with both pride and despair, knowing that this love, like the private version of you, could not survive outside the walls we built. And in that silence, I realized, sometimes love is not about being seen. Sometimes it is about enduring. Sometimes it is about holding on to someone when the world refuses to acknowledge them and hoping, against all evidence, that one day, they might choose to see you back. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. It was a day like any other, sunlight spilling lazily through the windows, the world outside carrying on its business, and me walking beside you with the quiet weight of all the things I hadn't said. I held my heart carefully, like a fragile vase, knowing that any sudden movement could shatter it. I believed that the private version of us was enough to survive the scrutiny of the world. I believed that behind closed doors, our love was safe. I was wrong. You introduced me to a group of your friends that afternoon. My heart had lifted at the thought of being part of your world, even in the smallest way. I smiled, tried to appear casual, but my eyes searched for a spark of recognition in yours, a signal that what existed between us privately was still real publicly. I wanted that connection. I craved it. But the world has a way of showing you what's true, whether you're ready or not. You called me by name, and I froze. Not with warmth. Not with the quiet intimacy I'd been waiting for. You said it like it was the name of someone you barely knew. Like you were reading it off a card. And then, as casually as the sunlight filtered through the leaves, you said, "Oh, this is just my friend." My chest tightened. The words were not loud, but they slammed into me with the force of a hurricane. I could feel them in every bone, every hollow of my body. Just a friend. You had introduced me to the world as if all the hours we had spent together, all the nights, all the whispers, all the love I had carried silently, it had been nothing. I looked at you, searching for something, an apology, a recognition, a hint that this was a mistake. But your eyes met mine for a fraction of a second and then moved on. There was nothing there. Nothing at all. And in that moment, I saw the truth. I had been invisible. Invisible to the world. Invisible to your friends. Invisible in public spaces, in conversations, in photographs where I had been erased without effort. I was not the person you held in private. I was not the one who mattered outside the walls we had built together. I realized that the private version of you, the one who kissed me softly, who held my hand, who whispered my name like it belonged only to me, was a secret you had chosen to keep. And I had been the fool who thought love could survive as a secret. I wanted to speak. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to shout that the world could not define what we had. But my voice failed me. My throat tightened, my hands shook, and I could feel the weight of every secret I had carried for you pressing down like stone. Instead, I smiled. I smiled and nodded, pretending the words didn't sting, pretending the invisible knife lodged in my chest wasn't twisting deeper with every passing second. I felt my heart cracking quietly, silently, in a way no one else could hear. I held it together because I had no other choice. Because no one saw the person I was in private, and now no one could see the hurt that was spilling across my face. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to vanish from your life entirely and take with me the love I had kept alive through silence. I wanted to escape the cruel irony of being cherished in secret while being denied recognition everywhere else. But I didn't leave. I stayed, because part of me still hoped that behind that mask, behind the carefully curated version of yourself you showed the world, there was someone who would recognize me. Someone who would remember what we had. Someone who would choose me, even when it was inconvenient, even when it wasn't safe, even when it was easier to leave me as a secret. And yet, I knew it wouldn't happen. That day, I realized love isn't enough if it only exists in shadows. That love cannot thrive when one person exists in the light and the other hides in darkness. That sometimes, the person you give everything to, the one you love without measure, does not have the courage, or the willingness, or the capacity to love you back in the same way. I learned that day that I had been living a beautiful lie. The private version of us, the one I had believed in with all my heart, was not the truth. The truth was harsher. The truth was cold. The truth was that I was expendable when the world was watching. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the world at you and demand the love I had earned. But I did none of those things. I walked beside you, my lips curved in a smile that betrayed nothing, my heart heavy with the silent knowledge that everything we had was not enough. And as I walked, I felt the first real pang of clarity. I could no longer live only in the private spaces of love. I could no longer exist in the shadows, waiting for a recognition that would never come. The door to our private world would always be there, but outside, I was invisible. And the world outside, the one that mattered, was calling me to see it, to face it, and to survive it without you. The first time I truly let go, it wasn't loud. It wasn't a confrontation or a dramatic exit. It was quiet, deliberate, and terrifying. I woke up one morning and realized that the life I had been living 1 foot in shadows, 1 foot in silence, was not living at all. I had spent years shrinking, waiting, hiding my love, convincing myself that private moments could outweigh public absence. But love, I finally understood, is not meant to be a secret. I didn't need your approval anymore. I didn't need your hand to hold mine when no one was looking. I didn't need the hollow comforts of whispered affection that vanished the moment someone else entered the room. I needed to exist openly, unapologetically, without waiting for someone else to grant me space in their life. I started small. I took walks alone, letting the world see me. I laughed in public without searching for your reflection in the crowd. I spoke freely, without measuring every word, without fearing judgment, without waiting for someone to confirm that I mattered. Every step away from you felt like a reclaiming of the parts of me I had lent to your shadows. It wasn't easy. Memories of our private world clung to me like shadows, like ghosts that whispered your name in empty rooms. I missed you, yes, even when I knew you weren't mine outside the walls. I missed the comfort, the intimacy, the illusion that I could survive on secret love alone. But I also realized that missing you didn't have to mean losing myself. Missing you could be a step towards something larger, a version of me that existed fully, openly, fiercely. I started to speak my truth. Not to you, not for you, but for myself. I wrote down the things I had never dared to say aloud: the hurt, the hope, the heartbreak. I let the anger and the sadness pour onto the page until my chest was lighter. I let myself feel it all, raw and untamed, and in doing so, I reclaimed the parts of me that had been silenced for too long. I set boundaries. I stopped apologizing for existing. I stopped waiting for a private world to validate my love. I stopped shrinking so that someone else could feel safe. And for the first time, I realized that love is not a reward to be earned in secret. It is a force to be shared openly, fearlessly, and without compromise. You tried, sometimes, to reach me. A lingering touch here, a look there, as if reminding me that we still existed in that hidden space. But I had learned the hardest lesson of all: no one can give you what they are unwilling to show publicly. The private version of love is not enough when the public world refuses to recognize it. And I could no longer settle for fragments. I deserved the whole. So I chose myself. I walked away from the shadows we had built together. I left behind the quiet rooms, the whispered promises, the love that existed only in hiding. I stepped into the light, letting the world see me fully, letting myself breathe without reservation. I embraced the parts of me that had been dormant, ignored, and unvalued. I discovered that I could be strong, complete, and radiant without your validation. It was painful, yes. The ache of letting go lingered longer than I expected. Some nights, I still felt the absence of your private self, the warmth of your hand, the intimacy of your whispers. But each day, the pain softened, replaced by something stronger: freedom. Freedom to love myself without conditions, to live without fear, to exist without hiding. I realized that the love I gave in silence was not wasted. It had taught me resilience, compassion, and depth. It had shown me the intensity of my own heart. And now, I could direct that love back to myself, unapologetically, fully, and without compromise. We were perfect in private. That much was true. But being perfect in secret is not enough to survive in the world. Love, like life, demands visibility. It demands courage. It demands reciprocity. And I finally understood that if it couldn't be shared openly, it was not worth giving up my existence for. I chose light over shadow. Presence over absence. Myself over a love that could only exist when hidden. And in that choice, I discovered a truth I had never known before: the love I have for myself is not quiet, not secret, and not hidden. It is bold, it is radiant, it is mine. The door to our private world is closed now, and I do not look back. I carry the memory of what we were, the warmth of what we shared, and the lessons I learned. But I walk forward, whole, visible, and alive. I am no longer a secret. I am no longer invisible. I am no longer waiting. I am free.